Thank you, Vice President Lehi. And thank you to all of our tribal leaders for making clear the impact of this water settlement on your communities, on your tribal members. I'm going to direct my first round of questions to you, Mr. Cameron, just more of the technical questions regarding not only the settlement we're talking about today, but outstanding ones as well. I mentioned in my opening that we had created, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Indian Water Rights Completion Fund. We've got numerous proposed settlements that are pending this Congress that together represent about $9 billion in potential federal commitments. Pretty easy question here. Does the department believe that there is a funding gap for future settlements that Congress may authorize? And if so, what kind of a mechanism does the department believe that we should be using to fund those obligations? Should it be coming out of annual appropriations? Should we be looking to another dedicated fund? Is there perhaps a third alternative? First, the funding gap, and then a proposal or a suggestion as to how we address such.
Yes, Senator, there very definitely is a funding gap. Thanks. There's very definitely a funding gap, and a significant funding gap, furthermore. And we are happy to use all the tools that Congress might, in its wisdom, decide to provide to us to bridge that funding gap. As you indicated, there is that settlement fund, about $120 million a year. That helps. There are some funds that are still available from the bipartisan infrastructure law.
How much do you know is still available under that?
Not off the top of my head, but it's nowhere near $9 billion. It's probably nowhere near $1 billion, frankly, at this point. Annual discretionary appropriations could not possibly meet the obligations that are implied by the various water rights settlements that are facing us. Bureau of Reclamation's appropriated dollars are the order of $1.5 billion a year. So we'd have to zero out virtually everything else going on inside the Bureau in order to fund even $2 billion a year of Indian water rights settlements.
Well, I think it speaks to the challenge that we have, because I agree with Senator Schatz here. We've got an obligation. These are treaty and trust responsibilities. So it's one thing to provide for the authorizations or the approval of the settlements. It's how then we take that next step, because if what we're talking about is really trying to get to the wet water, you don't get there if we haven't funded that. I mentioned the other proposed settlements that are under consideration this Congress. Back in March, we reported 4 settlement bills for tribes in New Mexico coming out of committee here. And for those 4, the estimated total is $2.75 billion in federal costs. Has the administration reviewed these 4 New Mexico settlements, and do you have any concerns about these settlements as written?
We certainly are aware of them, Senator. We typically don't take position on legislation until we're invited to testify on those particular bills. So I guess our next opportunity might be over on the House side, to express a formal administration position.
Well, it would be helpful if there are concerns about the specific settlements, if you can be communicating with the committee here. We're trying to sketch out how we're going to take on this massive funding challenge here. And so if you could work with us on that. Let me turn specifically to S-953. You raise concerns about the cost of the settlement in your testimony. So you've outlined in your remarks here too kind of the criteria that the government looks to. But the government evaluates settlement costs in part by considering the existing federal trust responsibilities and other unmet federal obligations to the tribes. So given that framework, with the funding authorized by this settlement in 953, help fulfill the unmet federal programmatic responsibilities. And this is everything that the tribal leaders here have talked about, which is water supply, safe drinking water, sanitation infrastructure, and assuming that it does meet those federal responsibilities. How did the department account for these existing obligations when you're evaluating the overall cost to this settlement and whether or not it's appropriate under the policies?
So first of all, Senator, the bill would accomplish a lot of good things. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And it would provide drinking water for folks who haven't had it forever. And that would be really useful and a good and positive thing for the United States to do. The criteria and procedures are a tool to help guide the department's and the administration's analysis of the obligations of the United States. They don't necessarily determine what our position is going to be on any particular bill. But I do need to reiterate, $5 billion is a lot of money, and we look forward to working with the committee and with the three tribes and the other interested parties, of which there are quite a few, to see if we can't creatively come up with some ideas to still satisfy the purposes of the bill at somewhat less cost.
So one of the things that your testimony mentions is the possibility of reevaluating the size and the scope of the pipeline. So I'm assuming that's just one of many out there. But how are projects like this evaluated by the department, by the Bureau of Rec, on how these cost estimates are developed? You've suggested there's room here to work this number down. What's the best way here to ensure that we're actually getting accurate cost estimates for these kinds of infrastructure projects? I mean, are we just kind of taking a big number and saying this seems like it's in the neighborhood, or how specific are you actually getting in drilling down the cost?
The best way to do it, Senator, is to have a full-blown feasibility study. When we start looking at legislation like this, the first step is an appraisal study, which is a very high level. But we really need, not just for this bill, but for any piece of legislation, even in the Corps of Engineers world, outside of the context of Indian water rights settlements, a full-blown feasibility study where they're on-the-ground geological analyses, are actually walking the ground and doing really reliable construction estimates. That's the best way to begin. More broadly, we look at the perceived financial benefits and costs of a project. We look at the litigation risk on the part of the United States, where our friends over here potentially to sue us, to enforce perceived trust responsibilities or other statutory responsibilities on the part of the secretary. But we also look more broadly at what are the perhaps not easy to calculate trust responsibilities to tribes of the United States more generally. And Secretary Burgum had a great relationship with North Dakota tribes. He's made it very clear to his political leadership at the department that he wants to have a good relationship and be responsive to the needs of all tribes across the country. It's a negotiation process. It's an evaluation of different alternatives. when you meet with the tribes. You mentioned perhaps changing the nature of the pipeline. That might be one possibility. Another possibility would be instead of an upfront one-time payment, this committee in other contexts has provided for annual payments over some number of years. That might be one way to address at least a one-time hit on the Treasury. We could potentially look at changing the scope of the trust funds. And there may be other ideas too, and we would welcome the opportunity to get into the details with the three tribes and your committee as well as your colleagues over on the House side to brainstorm about a path forward.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that there's no one easy answer to that question that I asked you, so fair enough. But it is going to require a fair amount of communication back and forth. I am well over my time. I'm going to turn to the Vice Chair.
The chair has no time limits. I want to thank our tribal leaders for being here. I want to thank our tribal members for being here. We really appreciate you making the trip, and it does reinforce how essential this is to Indian country. I want to also thank Senator Kelly for his leadership alongside Senator Gallego. Mr. Cameron, in your written testimony, you stated that the department is committed to implementing enacted Indian water rights settlements so long as there is funding to do so. Does the Reclamation Water Settlement Fund currently have enough money to complete enacted settlements?
No, sir, it does not.
Does the Reclamation Water Settlement Fund have enough money to support pending settlements, including S953, if they were enacted today?
We could not support S953 in terms of there isn't enough money in the fund. I'm not taking a position on a 953 itself, but to your question directly.
You couldn't fund it?
We could not.
Would you support funding that is both adequate and stable to complete these settlements, both enacted and those pending before Congress?
Yes, sir. The challenging part of your question is, folks would define those terms perhaps a bit differently, but we're definitely committed to fulfilling our obligations as the Congress has presented to us in these statutes once enacted.
What do you mean by folks may define those terms a bit differently?
I think you used the term appropriate there in your question. There may be different perspectives on what appropriate means, but having said that, we are committed to implementing the laws as the Congress passed them.
Will Reclamation request additional funding or provide a legislative proposal in the President's budget request to fix the shortfall in funds for the Indian rights water settlements?
Senator, the FY27 budget has not been released yet by the administration, so I'm unfortunately not able to answer that question publicly at this point.
Can you work with the staff of the Indian Affairs Committee led by the chair on a path forward so that we're not sort of downstream from the president's budget? I understand. I've spoken to Secretary Burgum. It's one of the reasons I voted for Secretary Burgum is his commitment to tribal and trust responsibilities. And so I'm hoping we don't I don't want this to be a black box exercise where we find out later that in the president's budget we just are stuck. And, both of us sit on this committee and on appropriations and want to make sure we're both upstream and downstream. Is that a fair request?
That is a very fair request. I will commit both to you and the chairman and, frankly, your colleagues over on the House side that we're always happy to work with Congress to provide as much information as we can and find a path forward to address these very real and, unfortunately, increasingly expensive situations.
Thank you. President Nygren, nice to see you again. Interior testified today that it, quote, supports the policy that negotiated Indian water rights settlements are preferable to protracted and divisive litigation. 953 would end decades of costly litigation. About how much has that litigation cost the tribe and non-federal parties?
For the Navajo Nation, I believe it's been in all the tribes, the tens of millions of dollars and decades of resources. And I think by the passage of S953 would end a lot of that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cameron, how much has it cost the United States government, both Interior and DOJ, to litigate these cases?
I don't have an exact number, but it's fair to say it costs in the millions of dollars, and there are significant costs to the non-federal parties who are involved in litigation as well.
Thank you. I want to talk just a little bit about pay-fors. Of the 39 enacted settlements, how many had pay-fors in the authorizing legislation?
I believe the number is 9, Senator, but I can confirm that. Yep.
Okay.
4, actually.
4. Okay,
Right.
My staff had 4. That sounds right. Okay.
Right.
Final question, actually. Are there any accounts within Interior that are large enough for Congress to use to offset the cost of S953?
Well, we do have multiple, not in terms of the appropriated accounts, the annual appropriated accounts, sir, no. As I indicated earlier, we do have the Water Settlement Fund, a fairly small amount of money compared to the price of S953. We have some funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Hold on the Border Settlement Fund? I mean, first of all, I take your point that if we're talking about appropriated funds, you're stuck with whatever we appropriate. Fair enough. And there could be a big pot of money, but if we didn't make an appropriation, you can't just pilfer it. But on the border settlement accounts, is that what it's called?
Right.
I thought that was bringing in the billions annually. Is it not?
We have $120 million available every year through FY20.
But that's how much is appropriated. How much is collected, and then how much sits in that account?
I don't know the collected number, Senator, but I'm happy to provide that.
Why don't we work together on that? Because my understanding, and it's based on staff briefing me, is that is a real pot of money. It's not just in the tens of millions. It has been used in the past to pay for water settlements, and I think that's something that the Congress has to at least consider in consultation with the department. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Schatz. Senator Daines.
Chair Murkowski, thank you. The Fort Belknap have waited over a century to settle their water rights. In fact, they are the original tribe that led to the Winters Doctrine. They completed their settlement negotiations decades ago and have been waiting for Congress to do its job and ratify the compact. Assistant Secretary Cameron is ratifying an Indian water settlement, an effective way to avoid decades of litigation, which would cost the government millions of dollars.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
I want to focus on the costs of not completing settlements, especially for our farmers and ranchers. Montana's highline is semi-arid. It's a drought-prone region of the state. Many, when they think about Montana, they think about Brad Pitt with a fly rod and a river runs through it. And yes, we have beautiful rivers, and I grew up with a fly rod in my hand until Brad Pitt ruined it for the rest of us. But when you look at the highline in Montana, what you're seeing here is spring wheat production by county. Montana is a semi-arid state. Even where Brad Pitt filmed River Runs Through It, which is down there, not too far from Yellowstone Park, our average rainfalls are in the 14 to 16 inches there. Further north up on the highline, it's even drier, 12 to 14 inches of annual rainfall. Compare that to Washington, D.C., or Seattle, which, by the way, get about the same amount of rain. They get about 41 inches of rain. We get 12 to 14 in the highline. It is the Milk River that is the lifeblood of the region. It provides irrigation for 140,000 acres and drinking water for 20,000 people. As you can see, the Milk River Basin is among the most productive areas for spring wheat in the country. The same is true for winter wheat as well as barley. The Milk River Basin is served by the Milk River Project. It's an over 100-year-old irrigation project that diverts water from the St. Mary River and carries it across what we call the High Line, that northern edge of Montana. But due to drought and aging infrastructure, the project is breaking down and delivering less and less water to irrigators. You know the old saying, we say it in Montana, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting, and that is really true. This project already suffered one catastrophic blowout leaving thousands with limited irrigation and drinking water, and it cost hundreds of millions of dollars to repair. As they say, there's never enough money to do it right, but there's always enough money to do it over. And there's an example. The tribe is a senior water right holder. The Milk River Basin is over-leveraged. Put plainly, there are more paper water rights than wet water on the ground. And the Fort Belknap tribe is a senior water right holder. Without a settlement, junior water right holders, like the farmers and ranchers, face a huge amount of uncertainty because the way water rights work, it's the date when you receive that right, the date of the claim. The older the claim, the stronger and more senior the water right. Assistant Secretary Cameron, there are tens of thousands of unresolved claims along the Milk River. If we move to litigation instead of settlement, farmers and ranchers across the High Line could lose their ability to irrigate. So my question is, what might the future cost of not ratifying the Water Compact be, especially if wheat and barley producers don't have settled water allocations?
Senator, I think the implications are certainly serious. They're serious in terms of the litigation risk and the litigation costs. They're serious in terms of the disruption of the economic activity in the Indian and non-Indian community. They're significant in terms of the agricultural productivity of the land because, as you know, farmers need certainty about access to water. So it would clearly be in everyone's best interest to come to closure on that situation. And as I've indicated to your colleagues, we'd be happy to work with you and your colleagues on the House side to see if we can get some momentum going to make progress on this.
I appreciate it, and just what's adding insult to injury at the moment is our wheat and barley prices are in the tank. Yeah. Our farmers are losing money right now with higher input costs, with fertilizer, and it's truly some of the toughest times we've seen in farm country out in Montana that I can remember. One last question, Mr. Cameron. In your testimony, you said the administration supports building off past models of success for negotiating settlements. A great example is that when I and the rest of the Montana delegation worked closely with the first Trump administration to get the CSKT Water Compact finished, and that was back in 2020. How can I get your support for the Northern Montana Water Security Act and finish Montana's final Indian water settlement?
Yeah, Senator, I'm very familiar with the passage of that previous legislation. I worked for now Congressman, former Interior Secretary Zinke when that legislation moved through. And I still have a number of friends who work for now Congressman Zinke, and they talk to me about Montana water issues about every other week for the last year. So it's very sensitive to the situation. And the administration hasn't taken a formal position on the bill yet. We haven't had an opportunity to testify, but certainly can commit to you to working on legislation and finding a path forward.
Yeah, and this is, again, it's so much bigger than just the Fort Belknap tribe. It starts there, but this is all the irrigators along the High Line and my farmers and ranchers at the moment that span a huge swath there across Montana, the fourth largest state in the nation. We're smaller than Alaska, though, Chairman Murkowski. I know. I know who the chairman is, believe me. So if I could summarize, this is about water security for our farmers and ranchers. It's about water security for our tribes. It's about infrastructure investment for our ag economy. My bill invests, it saves money, ensures long-term stability for our farmers and ranchers with literally century-old infrastructure and helping out both tribal and non-tribal entities. It is time to get this done. Thank you, Chairman.